In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to configure content filtering rules in Security Gateway, including how to enter filtering rule conditions, assigning actions to be taken, such as rejecting, redirecting, copying, or quarantining the message, attachment filtering, and how to identify content filtering activity in the message logs. Security Gateway includes a content filtering system that allows you to filter mail based on a variety of criteria that you specify. And you can reach the content filter under the security menu right here in the filtering section. And as you can see, these are the current content filter rules that I have created. And if you hover your mouse over any one of these rules, you can view the script that is generated for that specific rule. You can also view rules that are global or rules that are assigned to a specific domain using the drop-down menu up here in the upper right-hand corner. And then notice the enabled column where you can enable or disable a rule by simply checking or unchecking the corresponding box. So let's go through the process of creating a content filter rule, including the various different types of rules and settings that you can apply to these rules. So we'll click on New, and this is the content filter rule configuration screen. The box indicating that the rule is enabled is checked by default. You can specify whether the rule that you will be creating applies globally or for a specific domain. So for example, if I create a global rule, and then we can give it a name. And then the way this works is you specify conditions that Security Gateway will look for, and you can specify more than one, and then you specify what action to take based on those conditions. So we'll talk about each one of these here throughout this lesson. You can specify multiple conditions using this link shown right here, and then you can specify whether all of the conditions that you specify must be met or whether any of the conditions that you specify must be met. If you select all conditions, you can then select a proximity setting in which Security Gateway will look for the contents or the conditions that you specify adjacent to the content that you're looking for within a distance or a proximity of a certain number of characters. In this case, for example, 300 characters. So let's start by creating a rule in which all conditions that we specify must be met. We can click on this link to add a condition for the rule. And with each condition that you create, you can specify what item to analyze, or compare in this case. And I'll go through these here in just a moment. And then you can specify how to analyze or compare the information contained in the field specified above. For example, is it a local user? Does it contain certain words? Does it not contain certain words or certain content? Is equal to, is not equal to, starts with, and so forth. So I can look for all the messages that are from using the mail from command or the mail from field, and then I can choose whether I want to match based on whether it is a local user, not a local user, whether the mail from contains a certain series of characters. And you have a few other options here, but let's say, for example, if we select ends with, and then we can specify, for example, a domain that we want to look for from within the email address. So for example, if I put something like example.info, and we'll click on add, and you can specify multiple entries. So for example, if we enter domain.com and we add that one as well, then using this rule, Security Gateway will look for all messages in which the sender, or the mail from in this case, ends with either of these two strings of characters. In other words, either of those domains. Once you've specified your first condition, you can then click on Save and Close. And then you can specify additional conditions to look for. So, for example, let's say we want to look for all of the messages that meet this criteria, but we want to add additional criteria. We can go back here to add another condition for this rule. We can then specify another condition to look for. For example, a keyword or phrase in the body or subject. And then we can specify whether the body or subject contains or does not contain certain keywords or phrases, or is equal to or not equal to the information you specify, whether it starts with a keyword or does not start with a keyword, or whether it matches a regular expression. So depending on what you select, you can then enter your information in the blank provided. So for example, if I want to filter based on the contents, in this case contains, within the body or subject, I can select that option, and then I can specify again the criteria that we want to look for using an AND statement. In other words, all of the strings will be matched, or using OR statements, in which case any of the following strings are matched. So for example, if I select all of the following strings, and then I enter all of the words that I want to look for within the body or subject, I can say, for example, let's just put in the word sale. Let's put in the word savings. And then we'll click on Save and Close. And then you can see under the conditions window that the rules you created are listed here. Here's the first one indicating the sender address that ends with example.info or domain.com. And the message body or subject contains both of these keywords. And then we can perform an action using the menu shown here. We can reject the message, discard the message, quarantine the message, send it to the administrative quarantine for further review, redirect the message to another address, copy it to another address, send a customizable note or alert to any address that you specify. You can add a given number of points to the message's score. You can send it as registered email using the RMail encryption services, as well as the eSign and track and prove services. And you can flag the message for required TLS. In other words, when this option is selected, every path between 2 points that the message passes through during the delivery process must use an encrypted connection using TLS, which stands for Transport Layer Security. So for example, we can select Administrative Quarantine and then save our rule by clicking Save and Close. And here's our new test rule. We can go in at any time to make changes to it using the Edit button here at the top. And if we select a different action, we can then specify different ways to handle the message. For example, if I choose Redirect, then we can scroll down a little further and you can then enter the address that you want to redirect the message to. Or if we specify Add to the message score, you can then designate the number of points that you want to add to the message score. If you want to subtract from the message score, you can add a minus sign to add a negative number of points to the message score. Other options include the ability to quarantine the message, or send it to the administrative quarantine, or various other options like I explained previously. If we wanted to make this rule apply only to a specific domain, we can do so via the Edit button, or when creating our new rule, by simply selecting the domain that we want this rule to apply to in the For Domain drop-down menu as shown here. And then we'll click Save and Close. So now, when we select the drop-down menu at the top right-hand corner, we can see all of the rules that are applied globally, or all of the rules that are only applied to a specific domain. So since we just changed that rule to apply only to example.com, I can choose the domain in the drop-down menu in the top right-hand corner. And here's our new rule. If I go back and I choose global, then these are all the rules that are applied globally. And then I can go back and I can choose all to see all of the rules that are applied globally, as well as the rules that are applied on a per domain basis. In addition to filtering messages based on content, you can also filter messages based on the types of attachments that they have. And this is configured right here via the Attachments menu under the Filtering section in Security Gateway. So to block attachments of a particular type, you would simply need to enter the file extension in the blank provided. So for example, if I wanted to block all file attachments ending in .xls, in other words, Excel spreadsheets, I would simply enter the file extension and click on Add. So if I wanted to block an executable, I could do the same with the exe file extension, again clicking on Add after each entry. There are shortcuts below that allow you to block all file extensions that fit within a particular category or file type. For example, if I wanted to block all types of audio files, I could click on this link here, and Security Gateway adds the file extensions for every file type that represents an audio file. You can do the same thing for executable files, where we'll add additional file extensions that pertain to executable files. On the bottom portion of this window, you can specify the types of attachments that you want to quarantine, and it works exactly the same way. So if I wanted to quarantine files ending in .mpg, I would simply enter the file extension and then click on Add. Likewise, I can quarantine all types of files within a category using the links below, just like we could in the previous section. So if I want to quarantine all compressed files, for example, we'll click on this link, and it will add the compressed file extension types. If you happen to list the same file type in both the quarantine and the block section, that file type will be blocked rather than being quarantined. And just like with many other settings in Security Gateway, these settings can be applied globally or on a per domain basis using the drop-down menu at the top right-hand corner. You can also configure exclusions. For example, you can exclude attachment filtering restrictions for messages from whitelisted senders, authenticated sessions, or messages from your domain mail servers. You can analyze the message logs to find all of the messages that were rejected or quarantined based on your content filter rules or your attachment filtering rules. So I'll show you an example. If we go to the All Messages log via the Messages Queues menu, under All Messages, you can see that we have two examples already. Here's a message that was rejected by the content filter, and here's another message that was rejected by content filtering. And we can double-click on a message and review the transcript to further see the actual process where it was scanned by the content filter and then rejected. And here's the section where it is processing the content filtering rules. Here is the actual rule that triggered the action to be taken below. The word party was found in the message subject, and the message was rejected. These other rules that the message is passing through are the data leak prevention rules, and those are discussed in a different lesson within this course.